It was an authoritarian, democratically elected leadership in Brazil, and he basically used the Trump playbook to inspire domestic terrorists to try to take over the government. And you're right, it looks a lot like January 6th in the United States. And right now, Bolsonaro is in Florida, and he's actually very close to Donald Trump. He should be extradited to Brazil. In fact, it was reported that he was under investigation for corruption and fled Brazil to the United States.
Okay, so again, the insanity of suggesting that we have to extradite a person who has not yet even been indicted for a crime in Brazil is pretty incredible. Meanwhile, CNN doing the usual routine from the reporters. The reporters in the United States, again, being completely ignorant about most of the things that they report on. They simply suggest that this is about January 6th, which, again, is an amazing stretch.
Yeah.
So what do we know about the situation?
Yeah, Fred, it's looking more and more like what happened here in the United States on January 6th, 2 years ago. And what happened was that earlier a group of supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro managed to breach the barriers established by authorities at the congressional building in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil.
Yeah, and it's just like January 6th. This is a big takeaway. As we are seeing, the stakes of politics seem so high, the passions are so high right now. What we are seeing in Brazil is the same thing, in some ways, that we have seen in a wide variety of countries, where people are more and more agitated over politics, whether you're talking about widespread rioting in France, or whether you're talking about January 6th, or you're talking about the BLM riots. There's a generalized feeling in a lot of westernized countries right now that civil society is in a state of complete breakdown. And this is a question I've been thinking about for a long time, is how do you actually establish legitimacy of a government to the point where people actually accept elections? How do you establish the legitimacy of a government to the point where people don't care so much about who wins and loses? I mean, they care, obviously, but not to the point where they feel like every election loss is the end of society as a whole. And the answer is society has to be more than government. If society is only government, then that means that any time you lose control of the government, you've lost control of all of society itself. During the Cold War, the West, because it was put up against communist Russia, posited itself in opposition to a centrally planned state and a centrally planned economy. The West banked on the idea that civil society and community had to thrive. This is exactly what, it was this point that separated us these in a way with civil society and community and replaced them with a giant overarching centralized government that made a bunch of guaranteed the fulfillment of those promises at point of gun. And if the promises never materialized, well, the gun was still there anyway to compel you to pretend that the promises did materialize. But the West said that's a terrible system, and what makes that a terrible system is in fact a compulsion. What we have in the West is a thriving civil society. We have all those little platoons of family. We have thriving churches and social institutions, and all this exists outside of government. We have localism, where people can make decisions for their own communities. We have this giant, centrally planned monster with tentacles in all of the areas of our lives. And then the Soviet Union fell. And instead of the West saying, to win, was our recognition that government can't be the be-all, end-all, the West decided, you know what we can really do? Now we have the freedom to expand government. Now we have the resources and the power to pay for both guns and butter. This is the argument that LBJ made in the 1960s. He said, why can't we pay for both guns and butter? And as it turns out, we could not, right? Which is why we had it bankrupt in the 1970s, leading to the Reagan Revolution of the 80s. And gradually and slowly, that became a sort of bipartisan consensus. Not just for members of government, but for enormous number of people on the ground. They started to believe that government could be the guarantor of all that they needed. And this is why we've seen repeated, as it turns out, when the government gets too involved, when government skews all the incentive structures, you get massive bubbles, and they burst. Whether it is the dot-com bubble in 2000, whether it's the state bubble in 2002, 2007, 2008, or whether it is the recession that we're about to see coming in 2023 globally. And centralized government control undermines legitimacy. This is the thing that I think people need to understand. Because the tendency is, when you start to see dissolution, that people in government and people who believe in government tend to think, grip harder. Okay, grip harder. Exert more control. Create ersatz social solidarity through government compulsion. And what you end up doing is driving more opposition and more rage and more anger. The answer to crisis of legitimacy in government is not government. It's everything else. It's rebuilding that community. It's rebuilding that civil society. And this is precisely the problem that you're seeing in Brazil right now. Brazil has a lot of regional identities. Brazil is an extraordinarily diverse place. Over the course of the last 20 years or so, there's been a promise that Brazil really bragged about and talked a lot about, and that was the idea of this sort of rainbow of people. Brazil was famously tolerant, extraordinarily racially diverse. You had indigenous people, idea was that there weren't going to be these tribal divisions. And then multiculturalism sort of became the order of the day, and government attempted to start propping up particular cultures at the expense of other cultures, as been widely remarked upon in the academic press. And which had been sort of forging toward a common point started to sort of break apart again, and regionalism began to rise again. And when you have very strong regional identity, and central identity becomes weaker, and not only that, the central government starts to exert more and more power through left-wing figures like Lula da Silva, through left-wing figures like Dilma Rousseff. What you end up with is more and more anger. And again, this is not just a Brazilian problem, it's a problem everywhere. If you do not have a thriving community, and community has to be based in the end on family. If you don't have thriving family, and that doesn't build into thriving local communities, and that doesn't build into thriving civil society at the local level, and then at the city level, and then at the state level, and then finally at the top level, what you end up with is an inverted pyramid where the social solidarity required to actually support a giant governmental structure is too big. And that's exactly what you are seeing right now. Now, yeah, I've been thinking about this an awful lot lately in relation to the United States, obviously in relation to other countries as well. Countries that seem to be thriving are the ones that actually have social solidarity. They're the countries that actually do have a vision of what they are as a country. They do have something that binds them, whether it's national identity or religious identity, something that binds them beyond local community and beyond government. And if they lack that, they start to fall apart. One of the little remarked upon aspects of Brazil's changing culture, for example, is its lack of religiosity. Brazil has been losing religious adherence for a very, very long time. Brazil, over the course of the last 20 years, went from about 90% Catholic to about 65% Catholic. It is a fast secularized society, and in coordination with that, what you see is a dramatic drop in the Brazilian birth rate. Birth rates are a really good way of knowing when a culture has lost its way. When a culture begins to lose its way to the point where it drops below replacement birth rates, you start to see a culture that is in decline. Brazil has had an extraordinarily fast decline in its birth rate. In 1960, for example, Brazil had 6 kids per family. Today, Brazil is at 1.65 kids per family. That is a huge decline. As recently as 2000, Brazil was above replacement rate. The same thing is held true in a wide variety of countries in Latin and South America. Again, fall apart, concerns fall apart, all those structures fall apart. And as government dependence grows, what you start to see is less solidarity. And so, coming up, I want to talk about the formula for government legitimacy that really explains why what's happening right now is happening right now. This is Ben Shapiro Show.
You start up a motorcycle and you hear it go bong, bong, boom when it takes off. I was losing my energy like everybody does as they grow older. And I don't want to be tired. I don't want to look tired, and I don't want to be tired. I started using Balance of Nature about 1.5 years ago. Noticed the results immediately, and I went, oh my gosh, this works. It's what I've been missing all my life. I'm loving life actually more than I ever have. I miss my Rava Zoom. I got it back.
Experience the Balance of Nature difference for yourself. See why Kathy Lee Gifford and thousands of others have had life-changing success with Balance of Nature. Take advantage of our New Year's offer while you still can. Call 1-800-246-8751 or go to balanceofnature.com. That's 1-800-246-8751 and get $25 off plus a free Vibrant Bite when you use discount code KLG.
Hi, I'm Bill.
And I'm Kathleen, and we are owners of American Vision Windows.
Happy New Year, Bay Area. Right now, American Vision Windows is making it easier to afford custom-made, beautiful new windows for your home with 0% interest, 0 payments for 12 months, plus free expert installation. Order by January 31st.
I've been in the construction trade for 35 years. The level of quality of products that they use for their prep work was top-notch.
It was a great experience. I can't ask for anything better.
Can you tell I love these guys?
Call 855-339-9956 or visit AmericanVisionWindows.com.
Kathleen and I are so thankful for our entire team at American Vision Windows, and especially for you, our customers.
Revolutionizing the home improvement industry one customer at a time. American Vision Windows.
For all offers, call or see website for details. Offer 131-2023, CSLB number 778326.
Are you suffering with joint pain or arthritis? Do you have annoying knee or hip pain? Shoulder, neck, or back pain? Have you stopped doing the things you love to do? These problems do not just go away on their own, but get worse over time. Would you like to avoid surgery and medication? Well, the Advanced Health Center of San Jose has good news. There is a free educational joint pain relief seminar on the latest non-surgical, non-drug treatments for joint pain that work long-term. It's called the Advanced Health Method, and it can help heal and even regenerate tissues and joints. To reserve your spot, simply call 408-916-4336 for dates and times. Pain prevents many people from doing the things they love to do, like taking long walks, golfing, tennis, gardening, and even getting in and out of chairs. So call now, 408-916-4336 to reserve your spot. There is limited seating. Get all your questions answered. Complimentary meal included. Call 408-916-4336 now.
I never write reviews, but Navage is so amazing, I had to leave. I've ever cleared out my sinuses as well. I'm blown away by how Navage works. That's a review of over 100,000 online testimonials praising Navage. I'm Martin Hope, the inventor of Navage nasal care, and I've talked about flushing out allergens, viruses, mucus, and germs. How Navage's powered suction can help you breathe better. Now your nose is an air filter, and Navage will clean it out. But don't take my word for it. What do people like Chad say? My nasal passages every single night. My wife says my snoring has gone way down. Snorefest be gone, unquote. Navage is the all-natural solution trusted by over 3 million customers to help you breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, stay healthier without drugs. Navage is available at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Bed Bath, Target, and online. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E. Clean nose. Brand new year, let's get your house shiny clean, huh? Call our friends at Zero Res. They have a fabulous Armstrong and Getty special. These are the folks who will, at a very reasonable price, get your carpets clean, your hardwood floors, your tile, and your grout without using harsh chemicals you don't want in your home. I'm going to tell you about the fantastic special from Zero Res in 3, 2, 1. Right now, because you know what? At Armstrong and Getty, you can get 30% off carpet and tile services. How do you like that? 30% off right now. Just give them a call, 1-877-321-0739. That number again, 1-877-321-0739. Or just go to ZeroResBayArea.com and make your appointment online with the promo code ZeroRes1. That's ZeroResBayArea.com. Res1. Or if you'd like, grab the phone number off the website and give them a call. Just remember to ask for the Armstrong and Getty special. Remember, there's a Z at each end of Zero Res. Go to ZeroResBayArea.com. Just make sure you tell them that Armstrong and Getty sent you.
Human development.
Welcome back to the Ben Shapiro Show. So I've spent the last few months, maybe years, crafting what I think is a formula for legitimacy of government. It's kind of important given what's happening all over the Western world right now. It's applicable to American government, it's applicable to government in Brazil, it's applicable pretty much everywhere. Because the truth is, the legitimacy of any institution, which is what we're of Brazil's governmental institutions or the United States' governmental institutions, rests on simple fundamental bases, and that is a social fabric. If there's no social fabric, you can't have a solid government. It really is that simple. So here's the formula for legitimacy. Okay, now it's a bunch of symbols here. I'm going to explain them. And it is a formula that I've been working through myself. So take it with whatever grain of salt you wish to apply. Legitimacy, L, equals, for folks who are listening to this, the numerator essentially represents consent, and the denominator represents levels. Any authority, the more legitimate it is, and the more control is exercised, the less legitimacy you have if you don't have enough consent. Right? So when control is really high and you don't have a lot of consent, when the denominator in this equation is really high and you don't have a lot of consent, the numerator is very, very low, you end up with fractional legitimacy, loss of legitimacy. That's what you're seeing. However, when you have high levels of consent, when people live in social solidarity with one another, and when the government is good at its job, people are willing to give up government. The problem is that governments have a real tendency, when the numerator declines, when social solidarity declines, when the efficacy of the government declines, they have a tendency to try to ramp up the levels of control in order to jack up to the government, and it ends up becoming a spiral that fails. What you really have to do is loosen your grip and allow everything to be rebuilt at the local level. So here is the equation. L equals, and the numerator is S plus, and then it's R times A plus I. Okay, so S in this particular equation represents social solidarity. So if you have an area that has a lot of social solidarity, that's going to help the government. Because obviously social solidarity means you're all going to vote in you're not going to offend your neighbor because you like your neighbor and you're not there to use the government to criticize your neighbor. Plus, responsiveness of the authority to input, that's R, times the avoidability of the authority. So if you know that the government is both responsive to you and also if you're unable to get a response from the government, you're able to avoid the government, right, to move out of the area. And this is the legitimacy of the government. I don't have to, if I'm in California and I don't like California, I can leave. That means that the government has a high level of legitimacy, one of the reasons being, even though I disagree with the way that California is governed, I can always take off, which is there. Plus, I, which is the ability of any authority to advance the interests of its population. So, in other words, if government has the following aspects, it is going to have a lot of legitimacy at any level. This, by the way, doesn't just apply to governments, it actually applies to families as well. If there's a lot of social solidarity within the area governed by the government, if that government is responsive, if you can avoid the government doesn't rule the way you want to, you can leave. And if the government is very effective at implementing the needs and wants of its citizens, it's going to have a high level of consent. Okay, the denominator, these are the things the government can do to undermine its own authority, essentially. It is violation of fundamental or pragmatic rights by the authority or destruction of rules by the authority. So the government decides it's going to wipe away civil society, it's going to wipe away your rights. It is now jacked up the levels of control it is using against you, the legitimacy of the government. R, right, this is R prime, it's the regulatory strictness of the authority. So the authority passes very, very strong regulations to move against you. This undermines the legitimacy of the government unless you've consented at a very high level to that government. And finally, the aggressiveness of the enforcement by the authority. It's more on this in just 1 second. First, the situation in Ukraine continues to get worse by the minute. Regardless of the politics of Ukraine, people on the ground are really suffering. This is why I'm so grateful to the people over at the International Fellowship of Christians destroyed over recent months. International Fellowship of Christians are essentials to help Norman need your help to continue getting Norman supplies. Please consider donating. The International Fellowship of Christians, $5 can ensure warmth, food, and clean water for children and the elderly in need. Right now, the fellowship has a special matching challenge where your donation will double in impact. Your tax gift would multiply times 2 to help provide twice the winter necessities and save lives today. Go online to benforthefellowship.org or text Shapiro to 41444. That's benforthefellowship.org or text Shapiro to 41444 to get started. So, the facts militate in favor of the delegitimacy of the government are if the government violates your rights, if it's very, very strict in its regulations, versus those restrictions. And, at the same time, if the numerator is really low, and your consent to that government is really, really low. This is what we are increasingly seeing at the top level of Western societies right now. Very low levels of social solidarity within the polity governed by the authority. Multiculturalism rips apart social solidarity. Decline of religion, which is a great combined factor in preventing tribalism, is falling away. As social fabric fades, that numerator starts to decline. It declines still further when the authorities are less responsive to input. This is one of the facets of bureaucratic government. When you have in the United States or Brazil or anywhere else a regulatory state that basically has no input from the public, and you feel completely disassociated from that government, you have no input, that's a real problem. Avoidability. When you're talking at the federal level, avoidability basically disappears. California, where if I don't like California, I can just move to Florida. It's a lot harder to leave the United States. So if the federal government decides that it is going to undermine my rights, it's going to increase regulation and then aggressively enforce that regulation, it means it's very difficult for me to avoid. And this prompts, presumably, bad action against the government. And finally, is the government actually good at doing the things the population wants it to do? And the answer here is more and more no. And the great irony of this is that in Western societies, as this numerator decreases, and as the denominator increases, a set of rulers who have decided, hey, we better ease back on the amount of control we're trying to exert over our citizens because we don't have their consent. We're not providing them the things that they want us to provide. We don't have social solidarity within the polity. We haven't spent any that social solidarity. We're not responsive to input from the outside. Now, what the founders understood, what the founding fathers of the United States understood, is that the best way to preserve the numerator was to lower the denominator. And what you want to do here is lower the amount of control that is available, right? You don't want heavy regulation. You don't want aggressive enforcement. You don't want regulatory strictness. You don't want violation of fundamental rights. And so we'll create checks and balances in order to prevent all this. But because people, citizens, were made promises by governmental actors, by politicians, because by both a neoliberal consensus and by people who believe that if they centralize power in their own hands, use a sort of state-sponsored mercantilism, that they would be able to promise the world. Because of this, the government was going to provide everything. And so they're very, very disappointed. And that disappointment leads them to believe that if they don't control the government, because the government, after all, has very high levels of control, not a lot of consent, which means if I don't control it, it's going to control me. And this is what we are seeing across Western societies right now. It's really, really dangerous. All the elites and everybody else. It's why the common citizens of countries ranging the West right now feel so disconnected from the people at the top. People at the top are seeking to increase the amount of control they leverage down on the population. And the people at the bottom are saying, the social solidarity to do this. We can't avoid your authority, and you're not serving our interests, and you don't listen to us. And so this disconnect means that the population is seeking to increase the numerator, and meanwhile the government is undermining the numerator by increasing the denominator. I know this sounds complicated, it really is not. If you were to sum this up, what the people want is to consent to those who rule them, and they want to consent to the rules by which they live. And what the government wants, more and more often, is to control. Because they feel like they are losing control. And they are losing control because they made promises they can't fulfill. And this is true of nearly every institution in Western life right now. They have made promises they cannot fulfill, and instead of saying, perhaps we should make more humble promises, perhaps we should make fewer promises, perhaps we should stick to the job that we are supposed to do. Instead, they say, we will increase the number of promises we make, and then more and more compulsion in order to ensure a rebuilding of a false social solidarity in which government is the only thing that we share. And this is why you're ending up with tremendous levels of social instability and governmental instability across the Western world right now. Democracy is going to respond this way. This is what's going to happen. And it's also why people feel that the government that does not serve their interests, they feel dissatisfied with that. Again, none of this is an excuse for actual violent action in Brazil, which has a democracy. You do have the responsive ability to actually go and vote and to change your government in Brazil. You've seen it just a few years ago. Bolsonaro became the head of Brazil. In the United States, there's no excuse for going and rioting on January 6th and taking over Capitol buildings for no apparent reason. It's not going to accomplish. You can actually win elections. The Republicans just took back the House of Representatives, for example. Now, Trump may still be president again. What this is to say is that we are going to get into hotter and hotter and more volatile as time goes on. If people in politics don't recognize a basic truth, the numerator matters more than the denominator. That consent matters an awful lot more than control. Social solidarity matters a lot more than control. And this is why so many people are deeply upset about the fact that it seems as though, for example, in American government, there are a lot of people who are invested in the idea that we can continue to undermine the numerator in favor of the denominator. So this is particularly true on the issue of immigration. This continues to be a hot issue in the United States. Joe Biden on the southern border over the weekend. And again, if you take a look at that equation, what you're doing when you vastly increase the amount of illegal immigration into the country is you're undermining social solidarity. You're getting rid of perceived responsiveness of the authority to input, because again, those people are not citizens, which means they have no input, and we are citizens and they're not, because it's literally happening in the country in which we live, and people are entering without our permission. And it obviously is not in the interest of the American population, it's in the interest of a foreign population. This is why people are so upset about what's happening at the southern border. We'll get to that in just one moment. But first, we all hope we'll never need life insurance. The simple fact of the matter is that we are all going to die. And this means that probably at some point in the future, your family is going to need to make up for lost ground if, God forbid, you are taken too soon. Mortgage payments don't just disappear after you die. Life insurance through your workplace might not offer enough protection for your family's needs. It's not going to follow you if you leave your job. Since life insurance typically gets more expensive as you age, now would be the time to buy. Policy Genius gives you a smarter way to find and buy the right coverage for you and your family. Policy Genius is built to modernize life